Now we're getting into perhaps what is one of the most common uses for Photoshop, and that is adjusting or correcting your photos. And Photoshop has a whole bunch of tools available to adjust your photos in very specific ways or in very general ways. And if you're brand new to Photoshop and you just want to apply some simple corrections, I encourage you to perhaps try out some of the auto features that are available to you. Now, all the adjustment features are available under the image menu here, and right away you see we've got 3 auto features right here: the auto tone, auto contrast, and auto color. Now, I can't cite any specific scenario where any one of these are going to be perfect. It's always going to depend on the image itself. So you'd probably just want to go here and try each one and see what kind of result you get. If I select auto tone, you can see the changes it's made there. It's enhanced some of the color and messed with a little bit of the contrast there. Let's go ahead and undo that. Let's go ahead and try the auto contrast. It's modified the highlights and shadow areas, but didn't adjust the color all that much. So that could be an interesting change. You can do the auto color, and you can see it's dramatically changed the color of my image, giving me a very interesting effect. So, depending on your image, like I said, you can try these auto features. If it gives you the result you're looking for, by all means, go with it. Otherwise, you can go into the more involved adjustment features, which are also located under the image menu in the adjustments category. And you've got a whole host of features here, as I mentioned, for adjusting your images in very specific ways. You've got this top category, adjusts your color and overall lightness and darkness values. You've got very specific color adjustment tools here, and other generalized adjustment tools and effects tools down here. Now, I'm not going to be able to touch on every single one of these. You can certainly go in and experiment with them. And I just wanted to talk about a few of the more common tools that a lot of people use to adjust photos. One of them being levels right here. I'm going to go ahead and select levels, and it will bring up this dialog box. And what we're looking at here in this window is what's called a histogram, and it's basically a range of all the tones inside this image. Going from 0, as you see right here, to 255, representing the 255, or rather 256 levels of gray, with 0 included in there. So you can see that this peak, where it's going from right, or it stops right about here on the shadow side, and it stops right about inside here on the highlight side. And this is a good thing. You don't necessarily want this to be going beyond the edge here, which means that your colors are going to be going outside the range there. So we're looking good here, but you notice that we've got some flat area here and some flat area here, meaning that we need to close in the lightness and darkness values of this. And it's simply a matter of just taking these sliders here and then just moving them in to where that range begins, or where the histogram starts, here on the shadow side. And we'll take this highlight slider and push that in to where it starts right about in here. And notice the dramatic change that has happened to our image. If I toggle the preview on and off, that's what we started with. And just by simply moving those sliders, we've got a really, really nice adjustment here. And I can almost be done at this point. I could go ahead and click OK, and I've made my adjustment. Everything looks great. Done and over. Well, another way of using levels, if we go under the image menu again and open up levels, is you can use the eyedropper tools here. And these allow you to set specific highlight and shadow points inside your image. So if I grab this shadow tool, it's represented by the dark eyedropper tool there, and what I want to do is look for the absolute darkest area of my image, or what point I want to be the darkest area of my image. So I can see that it's very dark here at the horizon of the water here, so I'm going to go ahead and click with that eyedropper tool right here, and you can see how dramatically darker it's made my image. But notice how it broke up the histogram here, making the values a little bit sporadic. Let's do the white eyedropper as well. I'm going to go ahead and click what I think should be pure white in my image. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this little white crest of the wave here, and let's just see what we get. See, that's way too dramatic there. So in this scenario, the eyedroppers aren't necessarily going to be my best bet. It depends on the image, of course, on how this is going to work. And I'm going to go ahead and reset these settings. I'm going to hold down my Option key and then click on the Reset button. So it seems that I've got a good range of tones here. I just need to close them in just like I did a moment ago, and that will be the best bet for correcting this image using levels. So I can just do all that, click OK, and I am done. So that's using levels. Now another common adjustment tool, of course, is using curves. Curves is considerably more complex than using the levels, but it does give you a much more accurate correction. It basically represents a range of tones, each end of this curve being the lightness and darkness areas. So if I move this slider in, you can see that the adjustment is made. One quick way of making an adjustment is just grabbing and clicking in the middle of the slider, or the curve here, and just bringing this down. And you can see it increases or makes the image a little bit darker By moving the curve upward, it makes it considerably brighter. So you can move and adjust a specific range of your areas. You can click other areas and bend the curve to get very interesting adjustments. You can do more precise adjustments, or you can achieve very interesting effects using curves just by modifying this curve all the way around. You can see it gives me a very interesting result there. And again, like the other feature, it's got an auto feature here. So if I just go ahead and click auto and it runs auto curves on there, you can see what's going on with the curves, and my image does tend to look a little bit better. And of course, like the levels, you have the eyedropper tools that you can use. So if we go ahead and reset this, we can go ahead and perhaps click in the darker areas and the lighter areas and get a very interesting adjustment there. So there's a number of different tools, and there's a number of different tools within those adjustment features to be able to correct your images. So I go ahead and click OK. You can see I got a different adjustment there. Let's go ahead and undo that. I'm going to go into the image menu again and show you just a couple of more. We've got the various color effects as you see right here. If I go in here, and one very common one I use a lot here is hue saturation. Here's where I can go in and actually increase the saturation of the overall colors. You can see the result I get there, and modify that. If I wanted to apply a color screen over my image, you just click colorize and you get a monochromatic version of your image, and just dragging this hue slider you can change the overall color. And this is interesting for background effects and things like that. You can adjust the lightness and darkness of that color as well. So if you wanted to get a screen background as part of a design, you can certainly use that. Also inside here we have a number of different effects features. As I mentioned, we can do a gradient map, which basically is like using the screening, but you can use gradients in the sense that you can apply various color effects as well. So it's not just adjusting, but it's also applying various effects to get very different results. You can there's a new black and white feature, which allows you to have a little bit more control when you want to make your images more grayscale. And you can use the color slider. So depending on what types of colors are dominant in the image, there was a lot of blue in there. So if we adjust that, you can certainly do that. This will give you a greater degree of control than simply converting your image to grayscale, which is going to look a little bit more flat. By being able to adjust all the various colors, you can get a much more or a much better black and white version of your image. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of these various adjustment tools in here. One other one, which is fairly new in recent versions, is the exposure. So we can increase the exposure of this image a little bit. We can offset that just to give it a little bit more interest there. And again, it has the eyedropper tools as any other features, but you can see it makes a very specific correction. And again, it's always going to depend on your image as to what type of adjustment you're going to need to apply. So as I mentioned, the most common ones, of course, are levels and curves. Hue saturation is a very popular one. And as you saw, in every one of these, there are those auto buttons. So before you go and messing with any of the settings in here, click that auto button, and it just might give you the correction you're looking for. Otherwise, go in there, just modify those sliders, and see what kind of correction you get, and hopefully it'll work out for you. Now, that's a brief introduction of the adjustment tools. In the next lesson, I want to get a little bit more in depth with adjustments and talk about something new in CS4, something we have called the adjustment panel, and using adjustment layers.